guys, this is Chris with 240 Rescue. Unfortunately, I have another yellow Volvo 242 video today. It's my 77 and it was driving well. It was shifting good with the new components and everything, but I noticed that it started to have some hot start issues as well as going a little lean on wide open throttle. And then I finally noticed that there's actually a leak coming from the fuel pump or somewhere around the fuel pump, fuel accumulator assembly. And the thing about the 77 and the pre-78 240s is they have a fuel pump in a very peculiar location. It's actually mounted attached to the fuel tank, and everything's kind of tight to get to. So it's up on jack stands again, and I'll see if I can get some footage of the leak, and we'll decide what we're going to do with it after that. So I am going to have to, I'm going to take off this, this is part of the crash triangle system. And there's supposed to be another piece that's on the caliper in the event of a rear end collision. This would contact the other piece in the caliper and prevent the fuel tank from smashing into the rear axle and into the cabin. But this is off, but I will likely keep this on just because it does protect the wheels and debris from the fuel pump that's here. But to get a good shot of it, I have to take it off temporarily. All right, so here it is. Here you have the, this is a supply line from the tank, and it loops all the way up there. I'm not sure exactly how much of this stuff is OEM and how much the previous owner has messed around with, but you know, it hits this elbow, supplies the fuel. This is the connection for a 12-volt connection to the relay. And then here would be the output for the fuel pump, and it goes into this, which is something for KJET models, Turbo NNA. It's called a fuel accumulator, and what it does is there's just a simple diaphragm in there, and it keeps constant pressure in the fuel system. It's supposed to keep constant pressure and also to keep the pressure there when you turn the car off, so the starts are a little bit easier. But when the diaphragm in here tears, this can leak. That's what I'm thinking happened here, but I'm gonna run the pump just to double check on that. But here's the output from the fuel accumulator, and that goes all the way into the engine bay, where the KJET fuel distributor is. So yeah, everything's just kind of like snug in here. This looks, so I thought this was a single pump system, but it does look like there is probably a very early style in-tank pump in the tank. The single pump stuff usually has like a port, I think like right here, and that would just directly connect to the fuel pump, so it feeds from the bottom. It doesn't have to suck from the top there, but yeah, I think this is a dual pump system. I'm not sure if the pump in the tank works. I'll have to test that as well, but right now we're just trying to figure out the fuel leak issue here. So if you ever need to run your fuel pumps manually for any sort of testing, you want to find your fuel pump relay. This is for the early model 240s. And then you want to look for the red and the yellow wire. Connect the red and yellow wire, and I put it through an easy switch, and you can switch the fuel pump on and off. And that's a good way to test the fuel pump or any sort of fuel pressure test that you need without making sort of crazy changes. And when you're done, you can just plug it right back into the relay. Yeah, so it unfortunately does look like it's the fuel accumulator that's leaking here. I was kind of hoping it would be just this connector. It looks like someone put in, replaced the fuel pump to the fuel accumulator hose there and just used some worm clamps, but those actually seem to be holding. And the leak seems like it's coming from the top, which would be the fuel accumulator vent up there. And yeah, that sucks, and it's kind of dangerous. It's right back here where the muffler is and everything. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can do something about that. So here I have a another fuel pump assembly unit here. This is off the car, so you can kind of see what everything looks like. And you can tell there's a bracket, 2 rubber isolators on either side of the pump. The pump is very marked with the polarity for the terminals, and then the harness comes in between there. And then there's just a ground and a power wire. This would be the supply side, which goes to the tank. And then here is where the output of the pump is. It's supposed to be a fitted line that goes straight from the pump over to the accumulator, and then there's a compression fitting there, and then from there it's supposed to come out and go to the engine. And it looks like what the previous owner probably did on my car is just either replace the pump or the accumulator. And you know, that's kind of a more than likely you had to replace the pump, otherwise, you know, he would have just been able to disconnect this. But I guess he wanted to keep the accumulator and just replace the pump, and then he just replaced this side with a fuel line and 2 worm clamps. But the thing about these are, there's I think I talked about this earlier about the diaphragm being in here. This actually has a nipple vent, so if the diaphragm were ever to go bad, this is supposed to vent back into the fuel tank. The old stuff I don't think has it. That one obviously doesn't have it. When you feel up there, it's just some sort of screw, and it just bleeds out. I've read about the fuel accumulators on KJET cars, and what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to dampen the vibrations from the pump. The pump itself, it has a certain rhythm of when the fuel comes out, and this is supposed to keep the pressure at a stable pressure, so it doesn't mess with the fuel distributor. But that one obviously isn't working, and the car seems to be running and driving fine, except for occasional lean issue, which could just simply be a loss of pressure from fuel leaking out. So I'm gonna look into this a little further and see if I can actually just delete this. They cost about like I don't know, 150, 200 bucks for a replacement one. I don't think there's any really aftermarket options. You're just really looking at Bosch. And if I have to, I'll buy it, but I'll see if I can figure out something with this. So I have a bad fuel pump here. This is a spare unit that I have just to take apart. It's also one of the early pumps that attach to the side of a fuel tank, and this is the supply side, and you can just take that cap off, and once you pry up on this crimp here, you can actually take the top of the fuel pump off, and you'll find that there's just this winding and electrical armature inside, and this is the clearance inside the actual casing. There's 2 magnets, and fuel would flow through here and get pumped out on the discharge side that goes into the fuel accumulator. So I'm going to use this to help find a way to bypass the accumulator on my car, and just kind of use this casing as a way to test fittings and such. So the fuel pressure check valve that goes on the pump, is it's going to be M10 by 1, and both the one that comes off of an LH or late model undercar pump, main pump, and looks like the one that goes attaches to the tank for my 77, the same threading of M10 by 1. The only difference is the late model one is just slightly longer. So I have an M10 by 1 nut here. I'm just going to thread it on. And if I look at it, it's just about the same thickness as the threading for the check valve for the pump that I need. So this is the excess I'm probably going to try to Dremel off, and then I'll use the nut to chase the threads back to shape. So one of the reasons why I'm trying to use this LH check valve is just because not only is it free and it came off of a junk unit, but also the supply line for the existing fuel pump is a male cone fitting. So that's not really something that you'll find at most parts stores. And even if you can order it, they usually come in male, and I need a female side to screw into the pump. So yeah, this is the easiest and cheapest solution I could come up with. So now that I've got the check valve trimmed and the threads chased, I can put it into the body of the fuel pump. And as you can see, it spins in just perfectly, almost like it was supposed to be there. And on the inside, it doesn't look like there's any sort of way it can interact with the armature of the fuel pump. So I think it's short enough, and I think it's ready to go into the car. So while I have the pump off, I'm trying to replace these fuel pump mounting isolators, and you see they're bonded to the threaded portion of it, and once the rubber shears off, they're almost impossible to get to. Here's the one that shares the mounting through the fuel tank, and here's the bottom. It's rounded, it's sheared off, and I can't really grip it, so I'm gonna try my best to take that off. Got the new mounts slash isolators on, and now I'm just gonna work on the pump. Here's a fuel accumulator and bracket, and you can kind of tell it's a little moist. I guess you can't really tell. You just have to take my word for it. It's leaking from this vent, which means that the diaphragm inside the fuel accumulator has torn, and fuel has made it past the rubber diaphragm into where there's actually a giant spring in there. I'll see if I can, probably not cut this open. I'm too scared, but yeah, so some of the other fuel accumulators have a nipple there, and that leads straight back into the fuel tank, which is kind of weird to me, meaning that it's, they've planned for that diaphragm to fail. These just have like a screw onto them, so when they do fail, it just leaks fuel onto the ground, and that sucks, but it is what it is. So I have taken off the fuel accumulator. I took off the fitting, the 10x1 fitting, and I put in the replacement fitting that we shortened. And this part should connect to the supply line underneath, and hopefully everything works. And then I can successfully say I've bypassed this.
Okay. It's coming out.
Okay. Cool. All right, so here it is. The supply line is hooked up to the LH style check valve that's installed into the fuel pump, and I've got the new mounts on both of them. I've checked for leaks and it seems to be leak free. I even actually reused that old crush washer, which I probably shouldn't have, but I forgot. Anyways, yeah, I reattached the fuel line and everything seems good. It's leak free, and that's really what I wanted. Hopefully that doesn't affect the KJET function. So the 77 240 seemed to drive okay without the fuel accumulator. I think it's the warm starts or the hot starts that's allegedly supposed to be where the issues lie, so I'll have to wait until I park it to see if there's any actual lingering issues. But yeah, so it looks like you can bypass the fuel accumulator and still be able to drive the car. I don't know if that's the best route, but yeah, it's possible. So I just got back from a drive. I'm going to shut it off and check back in 15 minutes and see how the hot start is. So see how it likes a hot start without the accumulator. Okay, so it's been about an hour, and I'm going to restart the car and see how difficult the hot start is. It's a little rougher. Almost caught that time. All right, there it goes. It wasn't terrible. I mean, I don't know. I could live with that. Yeah, that wasn't too bad. So as it turns out, you can bypass the fuel accumulator on a KJET car. This is on an NA-B21F KJET car, and I think the turbo KJET cars run on a little higher pressure, so I'm not sure if that's going to be the same story there, but driving wise, it seems perfectly fine. Cold starts are actually a lot better just because there's not the fuel leak there. Hot starts are just an extra 30 to 40 seconds of cranking, which is not the end of the world. So far, everything's been good. I have to say that I haven't taken this in all sorts of driving conditions. You know, I don't take it to the track. I don't really push the car. I haven't even taken it on the highway yet. So at this moment, I would say it's more of a band-aid or temporary fix. I'm probably going to run it like this long term, but you know, it's just good to know that you can take the fuel accumulator out of the KJET system and still have it running right, in case you can't afford a new fuel accumulator, or you know, you're going to be swapping to EFI or LH in the future, in which case you won't need the accumulator in the fuel system. Anyways, you know, it's just nice to know that you can delete it and not have terrible effects. I did find this interesting is that there's actually tests to check the residual line pressure for a working accumulator. And the book says that, so a KJET operates around 80 psi fuel line pressure, and the book says that around 20 minutes after you shut it off, if you check it, the line pressure should be around 40 psi, which is about half of the operating temperature. And my thought is that that's 20 minutes, and after 20 minutes past that, it's more likely that the line pressure will bleed off until it's almost nothing. It's never going to be zero, even with the accumulator bypass, just because there's check valves on both sides of the system. The LH check valve that we put on will hold pressure past the pump, and then the octopus or the fuel distributor has its own check valve for fuel returning back to the tank. So there's always going to be some sort of residual fuel pressure in the system no matter what. It's never going to be zero. But yeah, that's how you bypass a fuel accumulator on these cars. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll keep you updated on my future projects. Thanks.